Congressman Joe Crowley, Chair of the Democratic Caucus. I'm solo today without my Vice Chair, Linda Sanchez. We just came from an extended Democratic Caucus meeting this morning and touched on several areas, but in particular, the Republicans have once again brought us to the brink of a shutdown. Democrats have said repeatedly, we want to avoid a shutdown at all costs. But once again, we're brought to the brink of a shutdown. If there isn't enough happening around the world through natural disasters, once again, whether it's fires in California, whether it is recovering from storms in Texas and in Florida, certainly in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, if it's not, again, a train incident, the tragic loss of life in Washington State, if that isn't enough to keep people on edge, Republicans have an answer for that, and that is to have a further man-made crisis, another brink that they're bringing the American people to, and that is a government shutdown. And what it really shows is that the Republicans simply cannot govern. They have a civil war going on within their own conference. They can't lead. They are crippled. They are crippled by the dysfunctionality. And then we have the issue of this tax bill, or as we'd say, this tax scam that the Republicans are going to bring up today on the floor of the House of Representatives. A bill that will increase taxes on 53% of Americans by 2027. A tax bill that will increase taxes on 53% of Americans by 2027. The $1.5 trillion tax bill, which cuts taxes for businesses and individuals, is expected to add over $1 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. So understand this, after this tax bill gives a tax cut to the wealthiest in this country, including Donald Trump and his family, when it gives a major tax giveaway to the wealthiest corporations in the world, a reduction of anywhere between 15 and 17% down to 20% for corporate taxes, it will also increase our debt by over $1 trillion. The 20% deduction for pass-through income, also now being called the Caucus kickback, would cost the government alone, just by that change, $414.5 billion in lost revenues over the next 10 years. $414.5 billion to some of the wealthiest people in this country. Over the next 10 years, we'll see that tax reduction. And that's according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. That is 29 times as much as the roughly $14 billion a year that the federal government spends on the CHIP program, the Children's Health Insurance Program. That funds health insurance for 9 million low-income family children every year. $14 billion compared to $414.5 billion, which they do not pay for. They borrow against our debt to pay for that. And yet they scramble and hem and haw on figuring out a way to pay for $14 billion to ensure that the poorest children in our country have a modicum of health insurance. That's the priority of the Republican conference here in the House of Representatives. That is the priority of the Republican conference in the Senate. And that certainly is the priority of President Trump. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead. You guys over here, House Democrats, seem pretty determined to stand against this next CR, whatever it looks like. But you're not seeing that same level of resistance or resolve in the Senate. Would you concede that, and are you picking up on the frustrations that I am among some of your House colleagues that Democratic senators aren't willing to go as far? And then I got another one for you.
Well, I think the proof will be in the pudding when they're put to the test itself on the floor. I think I wouldn't want to draw a correlation between what happened when we passed a clean CR a couple of weeks ago, where 218 Republican votes were provided here in the House before you had, I believe it was 14 Democrats who ended up voting for it. First, forcing the Republicans to produce the votes themselves. I think the same in the Senate, quite frankly. There is a higher threshold now for this moving forward. If the notion or idea is to send over a bill, as I'm told the Republicans are now, that would have an extender for military spending through September of next year, and a short-term domestic spending bill, that's dead on arrival in the Senate. They will not accept that. It really is a question of what will be included in a package that is a bipartisan package, and whether or not there'll be enough of a standard that will meet the standards of Democrats here in the House of Representatives. That remains to be seen. We don't know what that package will look like.
Well, why do you think House Democrats are more aggressive on this than Senate Democrats?
Well, I think that House Democrats have recognized that by sticking together and being unified, that we have more leverage. That has been consistent since 2013. We've seen that when Republicans have brought a bill to the floor that has any modicum of increased spending for domestic purposes, that they need Democratic votes because of their internal civil war that's going on between the Freedom Caucus and the so-called mainstream Republicans. I don't know if that exists anymore, but and because of that, they need Democratic votes to pass, and that has given us leverage to ensure that what does pass is more reflective of the values of the Democratic Caucus than not. Yes.
I know you won't know what the package will look like, but if the House passes a short-term CR to January or so, sends it to the Senate, if they attach Obamacare subsidy payments, send it back, do you think that would help get some Democrats on board in that case? Or
I think, from my personal standpoint, if they're passing a somewhat clean CR, that if it does not have the issues that we are concerned about, we've laid them out, whether it's CHIP, whether it's community health centers, whether it's the Dreamers or the DACA recipients, or whether it's the pension bill, whether it's Puerto Rico and the assistance, we've heard discussion about an increase top line for disaster relief, but nothing is yet put in stone. But we're saying if those issues are not reflective of the bill itself, that I would not be supportive of that bill. Yes.
so you just got out of your
Caucus.
meeting.
Mhm.
Where do you guys stand exactly? Are there certain provisions that are non-negotiable, such as
Well, what I would say, it all depends on the leverage that we have and whether or not the Republicans are able to hobble together 218 votes for anything. At this point, they've been able to demonstrate on a clean CR that they are able to hobble together 218 votes. Whether they can go beyond that in any type of spending increase for the next year is really the issue. And if they cannot put that together, if they need Democratic votes, then they will have to talk to us. And as I said before, the bill would have to be more than not reflective of the values of the Democratic Caucus at that point. Yes.
Just one more question. Congressman Keelan announced he's not going to run for re-election. What was your response to that?
I think under the circumstances of the further allegations that it's the right decision to make.
Your mayor is in Iowa today. Is that a good use of his time?
I have to ask him. I think everyone has a good sense of what their proper use of their time is. Right now, I know my time is well spent here in Washington fighting against what I believe was one of the worst bills to ever come before the House of Representatives. I know that's what's important for me to do. I think you have to ask the mayor himself that question.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned, I guess. Thank you.